The federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. stood like a monument to justice, its towering columns and polished marble steps gleaming under the late morning sun. Inside, however, the air buzzed with tension, as if the walls themselves knew they were about to witness history. Room 12, the largest courtroom in the building, was packed to the brim. Reporters jostled for space in the gallery, their cameras trained on the defendant's table. Political aides whispered urgently into phones, while curious onlookers craned their necks for a better view. Outside, news vans lined the street, their satellite dishes pointed skyward, ready to broadcast every second of the trial to a captivated nation. A small group of protesters waved signs, some in support of the defendant, others demanding justice, but their chants were muffled by the heavy oak doors. At the heart of this chaos sat Nikki Haley, former governor of South Carolina, UN, ambassador, and, until recently, a leading contender for the presidency. She was dressed impeccably in a navy suit, her dark hair pulled back into a sleek bun, her expression calm and composed. To the untrained eye, she looked every bit the confident leader, unfazed by the storms swirling around her. But those who knew her well, like the aides who had worked by her side for years, could see the tightness in her jaw, the slight clench of her hands resting on the table. Today was not just another political battle. It was the fight of her life. The charges were explosive, misusing $2.3 million in campaign donations, allegedly funneled through a shell company called Haley Ventures to fund personal luxuries, a yacht, a vacation home in the Bahamas, and undisclosed gifts to family members. The prosecution claimed it was a calculated scheme orchestrated by Haley herself. She, of course, denied everything, calling the lawsuit a politically motivated attack designed to derail her career. But the evidence was mounting, and the nation was watching. The room fell silent as the bailiff's voice rang out. All rise for the Honorable Judge Samuel Lawson. A tall, imposing figure in his late 50s entered, his black robe billowing slightly as he strode to the bench. Judge Samuel Lawson was a legend in legal circles, known for his sharp intellect, unwavering commitment to the law, and a zero-tolerance policy for nonsense. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his piercing blue eyes scanned the courtroom with the precision of a hawk. He had presided over countless high-profile cases, from corporate fraud to political corruption, and his reputation for fairness was matched only by his disdain for those who abused power. As he took his seat, the room seemed to hold its breath. Lawson adjusted his glasses and glanced at the docket before him. "This is a court of law, not a stage for political theater," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "I expect decorum from all parties. Let's begin." Nikki Haley's gaze flickered to the judge for a brief moment before she looked away, her expression unreadable. At her side sat her defense attorney, Mark Reynolds, a slick, high-powered lawyer with a reputation for winning unwinnable cases. Across the aisle, prosecutor Karen Ellis stood ready, her sharp features set in a determined line. Ellis was known for her relentless pursuit of justice, and she had spent months building a case that she believed was airtight. The stage was set. The trial of the decade was about to begin. Karen Ellis rose from her seat, smoothing the front of her tailored suit as she approached the jury. Her opening statement was her chance to set the tone, to frame the narrative before the defense could muddy the waters. She turned to face the jurors, her voice steady and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not about politics. It's about accountability. Nikki Haley, a woman who has held some of the highest offices in this country, stands accused of betraying the trust of her supporters, her donors, and the American people. Over the next few days, you will see evidence bank records, emails, and witness testimony that prove she knowingly diverted $2.3 million in campaign funds to a shell company controlled by her family. This wasn't an oversight or a mistake. It was a deliberate act of greed." Ellis paused, letting her words sink in. The jurors leaned forward, their attention locked on her every word. "You'll hear from experts who trace the money, from former aides who witnessed her disregard for the rules, and from a whistleblower who risked everything to expose the truth. By the end of this trial, you'll see that Nikki Haley didn't just bend the law, she broke it. As Ellis returned to her seat, Mark Reynolds stood, his expression one of calm confidence. He buttoned his suit jacket and smiled at the jury, his tone warm and reassuring. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just heard was a story of fiction spun by my esteemed colleague to fit a political agenda. My client, Nikki Haley, is a patriot who has dedicated her life to public service. She trusted her team to manage the complexities of campaign finance. And if mistakes were made, they were not her doing. This lawsuit is nothing more than a desperate attempt to tarnish a good woman's name. Reynolds paced slowly in front of the jury box, his hands clasped behind his back. The prosecution will show you numbers and emails, but they won't show you intent. They can't because it doesn't exist. Nikki Haley is innocent, and by the end of this trial, you'll see that the only crime here is the one being committed against her reputation. The opening statements drew the battle lines: truth versus trust, evidence versus intent. As the trial moved into its first phase, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavier. Reporters typed furiously on their laptops, live tweeting every exchange. The hashtag Haley trial trended on social media, with users split between those who believe she was being unfairly targeted and those who demanded accountability. Ellis called her first witness, a forensic accountant named Dr. Alan Green, a bespectacled man in his 40s. Green took the stand with a thick binder of financial records. Ellis approached, holding up a series of bank statements. Dr. Green, can you explain to the jury what these documents show? Green nodded, adjusting his glasses. These are transaction records from the Haley campaign's official account and from Haley Ventures, the shell company in question. Over a 6-month period, $2.3 million was transferred in increments to Haley Ventures under the guise of consulting fees. However, our analysis shows that these funds were then used to purchase a yacht, a property in the Bahamas, and several high-value gifts, all linked to MS. Haley's family. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Ellis pressed on. And in your expert opinion, were these transactions legitimate campaign expenses? Green shook his head. No. There is no evidence that Haley Ventures provided any actual services to the campaign. The transfers appear to be a deliberate attempt to siphon funds for personal use. Reynolds rose for cross-examination, his tone dismissive. Dr. Green, isn't it true that campaign finance is a complex field with many gray areas? It can be, yes, Green admitted. And isn't it possible that these transfers were simply misclassified by an overworked staffer? Green hesitated. It's possible, but the pattern suggests otherwise. The amounts are too large, and the timing coincides with personal purchases. Reynolds smirked. So, you're speculating. No further questions. The first witness set the tone. The prosecution had hard numbers, but the defense was quick to cast out. Next, Ellis called Sarah Jennings, a former campaign aide who had worked closely with Haley. Jennings, a nervous woman in her 30s, took the stand, her hands fidgeting in her lap. MS. Jennings, Ellis began. Can you describe your role in the Haley campaign? I was the deputy finance director, Jennings said softly. I helped oversee the budget and reported directly to MS. Haley, and did you ever raise concerns about the financial practices of the campaign? Jennings nodded. Yes. Several times, I noticed large transfers to Haley Ventures. When I asked about them, MS. Haley told me not to worry. She said, focus on winning, not bookkeeping. The courtroom buzzed. Ellis leaned in. So, she was aware of the transfers? Yes, Jennings replied. She dismissed my concerns. During cross-examination, Reynolds pounced. MS. Jennings, isn't it true that you were fired from the campaign for poor performance? Jennings flushed. I was let go, yes. And now you're here, conveniently remembering conversations that paint my client in a bad light. Is this payback? Jennings shook her head vehemently. No, I'm telling the truth. But the seed of doubt was planted. As Jennings stepped down, the trial's first day drew to a close, leaving the jury and the public divided. Was Nikki Haley a victim of circumstance or a calculating politician caught red-handed? The trial's second day dawned with an electric atmosphere in the courtroom. Spectators filled every seat, their whispers creating a low hum as they awaited the next round of testimony. Karen Ellis, the prosecutor, exuded confidence as she prepared to call her key witnesses. Her strategy was clear: tighten the noose around Nikki Haley with undeniable evidence. First up was Dr. Alan Green, the forensic accountant whose testimony had already stirred the case. He took the stand, his thick binder of financial records splayed open. Ellis approached, brandishing a stack of bank statements highlighted in bright yellow. Dr. Green, she began, yesterday you told us $2.3 million moved from the Haley campaign to Haley Ventures. Can you tell the jury what happened to that money? Green adjusted his glasses and spoke evenly. The funds were used for several large transactions: a yacht registered to MS, Haley's brother, a vacation home in the Bahamas under her husband's name, and various cash withdrawals and payments to high-end retailers. None of these align with typical campaign expenses. The gallery buzzed with murmurs. Ellis pressed further. Could these be innocent mistakes, in your expert opinion? No, Green replied firmly. The consistency and scale of the transactions point to intentional misuse, not errors. Mark Reynolds, Haley's defense attorney, stood for cross-examination, his tone laced with doubt. Dr. Green, you're assuming a lot. Couldn't someone else at Haley Ventures have made these purchases without MS? Haley's knowledge. Green considered this. It's possible, but the timing and family connections make it unlikely. Reynolds smirked at the jury. So, no direct proof MS. Haley approved these specific purchases? Not directly, Green conceded. But the circumstantial evidence is compelling. Circumstantial isn't fact, Reynolds shot back. No further questions. Next, Ellis called Sarah Jennings, a former campaign aide who'd hinted at trouble in her earlier testimony. Now, she faced tougher questions. MS. Jennings, Ellis said, you mentioned raising concerns about the transfers to Haley Ventures. How did MS? Haley respond. Jennings fidgeted. She brushed me off, said, we're running a campaign, not an accounting firm. Focus on winning. Did you ever see her authorize a transfer herself? Jennings nodded slowly. Yes, I was there when she signed off on a $500,000 transfer. She called it strategic consulting, but Haley Ventures didn't do that kind of work. The courtroom hummed with tension. Ellis leaned in. So, MS, Haley personally approved at least one transfer. Yes, Jennings said, her voice gaining strength. Reynolds pounced during cross-examination. MS. Jennings, you were fired from the campaign, right? Yes, she admitted, cheeks reddening. For incompetence? I made mistakes, she said, but that's not. Reynolds interrupted. So, you're a bitter ex-employee. Why should the jury trust you? Jennings squared her shoulders. Because I'm telling the truth. I didn't want to be part of something illegal. The jury's faces showed flickers of doubt, but Ellis had one more card to play. James Carter, a late addition to her witness list. Carter, a former Haley insider turned whistleblower, stepped up, visibly nervous. Mr. Carter, Ellis asked softly, why are you here? Carter swallowed. I couldn't stay quiet. I heard MS. Haley talk about using campaign money for personal gain. She knew it was wrong. A stunned silence fell. Do you have proof? Ellis asked. Carter produced a USB drive. I recorded a meeting. Reynolds objected instantly. This violates privacy laws. Judge Lawson overruled him. Play it. Haley's voice crackled through the speakers. We need to secure the family's future. The campaign can cover it, just keep it quiet. Chaos erupted. Reporters scribbled, spectators gasped, and Haley's face went ashen. Ellis faced the jury, victorious. No further questions. Day 3 opened with the courtroom crackling with anticipation. The recording had shifted the trial's momentum, and now Nikki Haley would take the stand to defend herself. Mark Reynolds had prepped her relentlessly, but the stakes were higher than ever. Haley strode to the witness box, poised and composed. She took the oath and sat, her hands clasped calmly. Reynolds started gently. MS. Haley, Did you ever knowingly misuse campaign funds? She met the jury's eyes. No, I relied on my team to manage finances. Any errors weren't mine. What about the recording? Reynolds prompted. It's misconstrued, Haley said. I was discussing campaign goals, not personal ones. The prosecution's twisting my words. You deny all wrongdoing? Completely, she said. I've served the public my whole career. I wouldn't jeopardize that. Karen Ellis rose, armed with emails and skepticism. MS. Haley, here's an email you wrote. Approve the transfer to H. Virgint. HV is Haley Ventures, yes? Yes, Haley said, glancing at the paper, for consulting. Ellis arched a brow. Consulting? Your own witness said Haley Ventures did no such thing. You expect the jury to believe you didn't know where $2.3 million went. I trusted my team, Haley insisted, her voice wavering. Ellis closed in. Trusted them so much you ignored warnings? Signed transfers blindly. I was focused on the campaign, Haley snapped. I couldn't oversee everything. Everything, Ellis retorted. $2.3 million isn't petty cash. And your recording mentions securing the family's future. That's personal, not political. Haley's eyes blazed. I meant the campaign's future. Ellis produced a receipt. A yacht for your brother, bought by Haley Ventures. Did you know? No, Haley said quickly. Really? Ellis countered, revealing another email. Enjoy the new boat, consider it a thank you, from you to him. Gasps echoed. It was a joke, Haley faltered. A joke, Ellis said, turning to the jury. Or confession? Reynolds objected, speculation, and Lawson sustained it, but the jury looked rattled. Ellis kept up the pressure, dismantling Haley's story piece by piece. By the end, Haley stepped down, her confidence shaken, the room abuzz with whispers. Judge Lawson observed it all, his face a mask. The trial was heating up, and the outcome hung in the balance. By the fourth day, the courtroom buzzed with tension. The prosecution had laid out a compelling case, but Nikki Haley's defense team had managed to muddy the waters until now. Prosecutor Karen Ellis stood, her voice steady as she dropped a bombshell. The prosecution calls James Carter to the stand. A ripple of confusion spread through the gallery. Carter, a former insider from Haley's campaign, walked forward, a man in his early 40s with a plain suit and a nervous gait. As he swore the oath, his eyes darted away from Haley, who sat frozen at the defense table, her jaw tight. Ellis approached him. Mr. Carter, what was your role in MS? Haley's campaign. I was her chief strategist, he replied, his voice shaky. I oversaw strategy, messaging, and fundraising for the first 6 months. And why did you leave? Carter hesitated. I saw things I couldn't unsee. Financial irregularities. I couldn't stay quiet. The room hushed. Ellis pressed. What irregularities? I overheard talks about diverting campaign funds for personal use, Carter said. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but it wasn't. It was intentional. Mark Reynolds, Haley's lawyer, leapt up. Objection. Hearsay, Your Honor. Judge Lawson's voice cut through. Overruled. Go on, Mr. Carter. Ellis leaned closer. Did MS Haley ever discuss these expenses with you directly? Carter nodded. Yes. In a meeting, she said we could funnel money through Haley Ventures to cover family expenses. Gasps echoed. Ellis's eyes gleamed. Do you have evidence? Carter pulled a USB drive from his pocket. I recorded it. I didn't want to, but I had to. The gallery buzzed. Reynolds objected again. Your Honor, this recording violates privacy laws. Lawson's gaze was unyielding. I'll decide its admissibility. Play it. Ellis connected the drive, and Haley's voice filled the room. We need to secure the family's future. The campaign can cover it, just keep it quiet. Carter's voice followed, but that's illegal. Haley's response was cold. Only if we get caught. Chaos erupted. Reporters scribbled, spectators whispered, and Haley's face went ashen, her hands clutching the table. Reynolds whispered furiously, but she stared ahead, dazed. Ellis faced the jury. No further questions. Reynolds tried to discredit Carter, questioning his motives and hinting at tampering. But the jury's expression shock, distrust said it all. Even Lawson's stoic mask slipped, revealing a hint of scorn. As Carter left the stand, the trial's momentum had shifted irreversibly against Nikki Haley. The trial's final day crackled with anticipation. After Carter's testimony, the defense paraded character witnesses to vouch for Haley's honesty, but the jury seemed skeptical. Then Judge Lawson made an unexpected move. "Ms. Haley," he said, his voice resonant, "I'll question you myself." Haley rose, her face composed but pale, and returned to the stand. The courtroom stilled, all eyes on her and Lawson, whose sharp blue eyes bore into her. "Ms. Haley," he began, "you've blamed your team for the campaign's finances, but that recording suggests you were in charge. Explain your comment about securing the family's future." Haley's voice wavered. "Your Honor, I meant the campaign's success would benefit my family indirectly." "It was a misstatement." "A misstatement," Lawson interrupted. "You said the campaign can cover it." "Cover what?" "I don't recall the exact context," she stammered. Lawson's tone sharpened. "You don't recall? Or you won't admit you misused funds for personal gain?" Reynolds stood. "Objection. He's badgering her." "Sit down, mister." "Reynolds," Lawson snapped. "This is my courtroom." Haley's facade cracked. "I trusted my team," she said louder. "Any errors weren't mine." Lawson didn't flinch. "Errors? $2.3 million doesn't disappear by accident. You signed off on it. You ignored warnings. And we have you on tape planning a cover-up. Are we to believe you're innocent?" Silence stretched. Haley's hands shook, her lips parted, but no words came. Lawson continued, relentless. "You've preached integrity, yet the evidence shows deceit. You hid behind your team while breaking the law. This isn't an error, it's corruption." Haley's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I didn't mean to break the law." Lawson's voice turned frigid. "Intent doesn't erase the crime. You betrayed public trust, and your excuses insult this court. You're accountable now, Ms. Haley." She stared, breathless, speechless. The room held its breath. "Step down," Lawson said curtly. Haley stumbled back to her seat, the silence heavy. The jury exchanged looks, and reporters sat stunned by Lawson's surgical dismantling of her defense. Her reaction mute. Shattered spoke louder than any outburst. The verdict loomed, but Lawson's words had already sealed her fate in the court of public opinion. The federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. stood silent as the jury filed back into room 12 after 3 hours of deliberation. The air was thick with anticipation. Every creak of the wooden benches amplified in the stillness. Reporters clutched their notebooks, their pens poised like weapons ready to capture history. At the defendant's table, Nikki Haley sat rigid, her hands folded tightly, her face a mask of forced calm. Across from her, prosecutor Karen Ellis exuded quiet confidence, while Mark Reynolds, her defense attorney, whispered last-minute assurances that sounded more like prayers. Judge Samuel Lawson entered, his black robe a stark contrast to the silver hair framing his stern face. His piercing blue eyes swept the room, commanding silence without a word. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" he asked, his voice steady and resonant. The jury foreman, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, stood. "We have, Your Honor." "Proceed," Lawson said, leaning slightly forward. The foreman unfolded a slip of paper, her voice clear but tinged with gravity. "On the charge of misuse of campaign funds, we find the defendant, Nikki Haley, guilty." A collective gasp erupted from the gallery, followed by a flurry of whispers. Cameras clicked as reporters scrambled to document the moment. Haley's composure faltered, her shoulders slumped, and her hands gripped the table's edge as if to steady herself. Reynolds placed a hand on her arm, but she didn't react, her gaze fixed on some unseen point ahead. Lawson raised a hand, silencing the room. "Ms. Haley," he said, his tone cutting through the chaos. "Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" The courtroom held its breath. All eyes turned to Haley, expecting a fiery rebuttal, a plea for leniency, or even a defiant denial. She rose slowly, her movements deliberate, as if every step carried the weight of her unraveling legacy. Standing at the defendant's table, she faced Lawson, her lips trembling slightly. For a moment, she seemed poised to speak. Her mouth opened, then closed. The silence stretched, heavy and surreal. Then, in a move that stunned the room, Haley spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, yet piercing in its clarity. "You're right, Your Honor. I've lost my way. I accept my guilt, and I resign from all public roles, effective immediately." The courtroom exploded. Reporters shouted questions, spectators murmured in disbelief, and even the jury exchanged wide-eyed glances. Ellis's jaw dropped, while Reynolds stared at Haley as if she'd grown a second head. Lawson, ever stoic, betrayed a flicker of surprise in his eyes before his expression hardened again. Haley didn't wait for a response. She turned, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted, stunned in a silence as she moved past them, her head held high, but her eyes glistening with unshed tears. No outburst, no defense, just an admission and a retreat that left the room reeling. The door swung shut behind her, and for a moment, no one spoke, as if the weight of her words had sucked the air from the space. Lawson's gavel fell with a sharp crack. "Court adjourned," he said, his voice steady but carrying a finality that echoed through the room. The trial was over, but Haley's reaction, a quiet surrender that defied every expectation, had left the nation speechless. In the days that followed, the federal courthouse returned to its usual rhythm, but the reverberations of Nikki Haley's trial rippled far beyond its marble walls. Outside, media vans remained camped along the streets, their satellite dishes pointed skyward as newsrooms raced to dissect the story. Inside room 12, the echoes of Judge Lawson's confrontation and Haley's shocking resignation lingered like a ghost, haunting every corner of the nation's consciousness. The headline screamed across every outlet: "Haley guilty, resigns in courtroom stunner." Social media erupted with the hashtag Haley resigns, trending worldwide within hours. Pundits on cable news debated her motives late into the night. Some hailed her admission as a rare act of accountability in a world of spin and denial, an unexpected grace note to a tarnished career. Others saw it as a strategic retreat, a bid to escape harsher sentencing or public scorn by bowing out before the fallout grew worse. On X, opinions clashed. "She finally faced the music," one user wrote, while another countered, "Coward's way out, resigning doesn't erase the crime." Back in the courtroom's orbit, secondary characters grappled with the aftermath. Sarah Jennings, the nervous ex-aide whose testimony had cracked Haley's defense, sat in a quiet D.C. diner, staring at a lukewarm coffee. "I didn't want to ruin her," she told a journalist from the Washington Post. But the truth mattered more than loyalty. James Carter, the whistleblower whose recording had turned the tide, disappeared from public view, rumored to be writing a tell-all book. And Mark Reynolds, the slick defense attorney, issued a terse statement: "A mess. Haley made her choice. We respect it and move on." For Judge Lawson, the trial's end brought no fanfare. He returned to his chambers, reviewing case files with the same meticulous care he'd always shown. Yet his words, "This isn't a mistake, it's corruption," became a rallying cry for those demanding accountability in politics. Colleagues whispered that the case had cemented his legacy as a judicial titan, a man who could unravel a titan like Haley with nothing but evidence and resolve. The broader implications unfolded slowly. Haley's conviction sent shockwaves through the political sphere, prompting audits of campaign finances nationwide. Her once loyal supporters split, some mourned the fall of a trailblazer, while others distanced themselves, eager to avoid the taint of association. The $2.3 million yacht, the vacation home, and the shell company Haley Ventures became symbols of excess, dissected in exposés and late-night monologues. Haley herself vanished from the public eye. Rumors swirled off a retreat to a South Carolina beach house, of late-night, calls to family, of a life stripped bare the ambition that had once defined her. No interviews, no estatements saídas. Her resignation, delivered in that breathless courtroom moment, marked the end of a chapter that had begun with promise and ended in disgrace. A week later, outside the courthouse, a lone protester held a sign: Lawson, 1, corruption, 0. Nearby, a young reporter named Emily Voss, who'd covered the trial for a small online outlet, filed her final story. Judge Lawson didn't just shut down Nikki Haley, she wrote. He exposed a fault line in power itself. Her reaction, quiet, broken, and resolute, left us all grappling with what justice really means. The story closed with a nation divided yet transfixed, a courtroom emptied, and a legacy reshaped. Haley's speechless surrender, born from Lawson's unrelenting stand, had not only ended the trial, but etched an indelible mark on history, one that would be debated, dissected, and remembered for years to come. Remembered for years to come. Remembered for years to come. Remembered for years to come.